I am Catherine Haskins. I'm the founder of the Bridge Club, and we are joined by some incredible people tonight. We have with us Dr. Cheryl Good. She is our Chief Veterinary Officer at the Bridge Club, and she will be living in the chat and doing our open toast tonight. We have Shannon Nowak, who is our Chief Veterinary Technician Officer at the Bridge Club. She too will be in the chat and doing the closing toast, but we do have two incredible guests that we'll be introducing in a minute. I really want to thank, with the deepest of my heart, to Mars Veterinary Health for bringing this topic forward. I have had, as have Cheryl and Shannon, Cheryl probably more because she had to go through all the research that Diccon and Julie and everyone else has been giving her and helping us kind of cull through it all. But we've had the best time learning about the impact that veterinary medicine can have on sustainability. So we've had an incredible time. So what I'm going to have us do is kick it off. I'm going to give it off to Cheryl for us to start before we jump right in on all the other introductions and get into the conversation.
Okay, so friends and colleagues and champions of veterinary medicine, welcome to this very special conversation. Tonight we raise our glasses, not to just each other, but to the idea that small shifts in our daily practice can make a big impact for our planet. Sustainability is not a distant dream, it's the choices we make, reusing, reducing, rethinking, that build a healthier future for animals, people, and the world we share. Here's to being curious, to being bold, and to discovering new ways to wear our scrubs a little greener. Go green and cheers.
Cheers. Oh, she thrown the, oh, go green. I thought it was going to be for Michigan State.
Well, it always is.
It always is. It always is.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to have two incredible individuals. Both are sustainability champions, but in their own ways. So first joining us tonight is Dr. Diccon Westworth. So the minute he speaks, you're going to automatically know that he is Australian. And of course, you're going to just want him to keep talking and talking because you're going to want to hear his accent and how great he is. But more important than that, he is a neurologist. So that means he's wickedly smart, like he's super wickedly smart. He works at the VCA Animal Care Center in Sonoma, but he also is leading the green team. Oh, I didn't see that floating glass before. That was kind of fun. He is leading the green team for sustainability at ACC. And I personally have had the benefit of interviewing a couple of his staff members. Wow, the work that they're doing is absolutely incredible. So he is very, very knowledgeable. He lives and breathes this. This is going to be a great conversation with all of his contributions. Then we're also joined by Margo Mosher. And I think a lot of people probably know.
Hey, Catherine, sorry to interrupt. Margo said she's having trouble unmuting.
Oh, well, she doesn't have to talk yet, but now I got to find her. Hang on, she's on the next page. Oh,
sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's good. Okay, you're good. Well, just as I'm talking about her, so many of you may have seen her. She has been really active on panel discussions, et cetera, really talking about sustainability with Mars Veterinary Health. But what's wickedly cool about her is this is not a new gig for her. She has been doing this her entire career and even before she was in animal health. But what I didn't know about her, which I was fascinated by, is that she does have an environmental management degree from Yale. Like, we're talking another super smart person, and we love to fill the room with people that are smarter than ourselves. So I'm going to first welcome both Diccon and Margo to come, but they're not talking yet because we're going to ask you all to do one thing first. So when we talk about the environment, what I think is really important, and this is all inspired by Diccon as well, he and I had a conversation and he talked with me about how each person has their own why they do something. Why are they picking up the trash on the side of the road? Or why do they, while going on vacation, suddenly notice to buy reef-friendly sunscreen? It could be a small step that people do, but what is their why? And it could be, like for myself, I love nature. I love to go walk out in nature every Saturday and Sunday morning with my husband in the forest preserve. Keeping that and the integrity of that is really important to me. So I just want you all to just take a second and think about what is your why. Why are you here tonight? Why is it that this is important to you? You don't have to say it to anybody, but I just kind of want to ground us in our own personal why before we move forward. So I'm just going to give you a second to just contemplate for a moment. And then I'm going to ask our two wonderful guests to share theirs. Awkward silence always makes people feel weird, but we're going to go with it. So I'm going to first start with Margo. Let's start with you, Miss Yale, and your long history. What is your why? Why did you get into this? Why?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for having me here tonight, and glad to be with you all. So my why really started when I was a little kid. I was and still am a huge animal lover, and I had many pets over the years, and I often wanted to spend more time with animals than with people. I'm also a kid of the 90s, and if you'll recall back then, for some of you, there was a lot of rainforest, Save the Rainforest campaigning that was quite effective back then, and it totally got me. I was obsessed with toucans and jaguars, and I had a birthday party themed for the rainforest. We played pin the tail on the toucan, the poster. So I was fully in. And as I got older and went through school, I got really fascinated and interested in wildlife and concerned with seeing the degradation around the world of ecosystems and wildlife populations. And so I got more and more interested in the environment, environmental health, also the connection between environmental health and our own health as humans, because we of course need clean air and clean water to stay alive, and so do other species. So I ended up focusing my work and career on this, and that's really what makes me tick, is working on these issues. And it goes all the way back to my love of animals and the rainforest, and just knowing how important this is for our own survival and other species survival as well.
I love that. Absolutely love that. Diccon, share with us your why.
Yes, so actually, I'm a British citizen, an American
Oh.
US citizen. I spent
Still
too
great
long.
accent.
I spent too long in Australia as a young child, so that's where my accent comes from, maybe. So it's a bit of a long answer, but my why is because the more I've been reading, I've realized, we absolutely only have one planet. This is our living miracle. Life started about 3.8 billion years ago, and it was an absurdly improbable event that led non-living complex molecules to form life. And then, 2.7 billion years ago, another very unlikely event where one cell ingested another to become a mutualistic symbiote. What that is it's a eukaryotic cell, organisms that are more complex and form all the cells in our body today. And they have organelles, including the powerhouses that are the mitochondria and the chloroplasts in plants. And, the importance of this is because you can trace our ancestral maternal heritage in mitochondria all the way back through history. So we are absolutely interconnected through time and space to all extant living things and all of those that have gone before. And, the more I've been reading, it was those proto-cyanobacteria that converted the sunlight into energy and transformed a toxic volcanic produced atmosphere into one with oxygen that we can now breathe. So we emerged with all the other life that now co-inhabits this planet, through 5 extinctions, one of which wiped out 90% of all life on Earth, to culminate in this perfect moment, this very temperate Holocene. And this has allowed humankind to flourish for more than 11,000 years. But we're now unfortunately entering this period called the Anthropocene. This is a human-created, very selfish, momentary epoch with potentially really devastating consequences. And we really are living in a fragile moment. Now, human-caused climate change and all the corollaries of the environmental degradation is happening, period. Sorry, deniers. But there's also, and it's really important to stress this, that there's also no looming human mass extinction coming anytime soon. So sorry, doomers. But if we do not rapidly change our ways now and over the next 10 to 30 years, we're going to face brutal climate change, weather heat events that's going to cost us trillions of dollars in health loss, adaptation and mitigation costs, result in mass migration, conflict, untold collective hardship, and biodiversity loss. but we have all the tools and resources to avoid all this. It is absolutely and completely in our hands. And we just have to find the will to do it. In fact, many of us are doing it. And it's going to help us save trillions of dollars, make life so much more livable. And we just need to learn not to exploit and extract for brief, limited gains, and try to show some respect and reverence for the 4 billion-year-old Gaia that we live with. And so my passion and drive is to encourage others to do the same, not just exist, but for us to thrive and live regeneratively. So my question back to you and the audience is, what are we waiting for?
Well, first of all, anytime we have a history lesson with a cute accent, it just makes it easier to go, okay, I know all that. So it's fantastic. I absolutely think that's wonderful, but it does make you wonder, okay, so Diccon knows all that and he knows about what's happening, but why is Mars Veterinary Health now really focusing on it? Why is the industry now focusing on this? Because he's clearly indicated this has been going on slowly but surely. But Margo, I'd love for you to kind of give us, why is this becoming such a top priority now? And why is there so many incredible, great innovations now happening to help us do that?
Absolutely. So to set the scene a little bit more too, and build on some of what Diccon just touched on, there's quite a few reasons why we're focusing on this now as Mars Veterinary Health. One is just picking up on the current urgency of these problems, and Diccon hit on that. Climate change is absolutely a critical issue that is impacting all of us and all species, both with the frequency and severity of weather and storms that we're seeing, infectious disease spread, new emerging diseases, heat-related deaths, the list goes on in terms of climate change impacts. And it also has a real financial cost as well. The estimates out there are pretty enormous. So we think about an annual damage cost from climate change ranging from 1.7 trillion to 3.1 trillion by 2050. So just to paint that picture, the backdrop of why we're talking about these issues and why in the veterinary profession is we can't ignore them, and they do impact us. And so we also think about practicing veterinary medicine. We contribute to all that. We do have a footprint, and that's from a range of things. If we think about a veterinary clinic, we've got the lights on, right? We're running equipment and machinery. We are driving to and from the clinic, most likely. We are using supplies, gloves, medicines, syringes, gauze, etc. All of those things have an environmental footprint, both from a carbon and greenhouse gas emissions perspective to make those items, to power the electricity so that we can have lights on, as well as other impacts such as waste from all the materials that we're using. So we're very aware that we have this footprint, we have these impacts, and we want to make sure that we are doing the right thing, that we are being responsible stewards of the environment that is deeply embedded within Mars, our parent company. The Mars family is very dedicated to sustainability, and this is a really big business priority for Mars and for Mars Veterinary Health and all of the businesses. We also, there's quite a few whys, behind this, and to your question, and I point to the other one of, there is also a pure business case for being a sustainability leader in veterinary medicine and doing sustainability work. Plenty of data points out there that show that sustainability is good for business. One of my favorite data points is from my rival, Harvard, the Harvard Business Review, which shows that companies that are doing sustainability, demonstrating sustainable principles, have improved employee morale, 55% higher than companies that don't. And they also see higher productivity of 16% jump. So there's data out there that shows, being sustainable is also good for business. And to bring it back home to veterinary medicine, we also see some external studies out there that point to us caring about these topics. So we see that over 75% of veterinary professionals want their employer to be doing good on the environment, and pet owners care too. Over 60% want to hear about what their clinic is doing to be a good environmental steward. So Lots of reasons why we do this. The other one, just to mention lastly, is there are often cost savings for some of these sustainability actions. If you think about energy efficiency, using less energy, great for the planet, also saves money. And there's a longer list of examples like that where you get that win-win. We'll talk about some of those in later on. But the long answer to your question, Catherine, but that's really the why. There's many whys to why we all in the veterinary profession are doing this work. It's the right thing to do. It's good for business. It's good for pets. It saves money and great for the planet that we all depend on.
So I just want to give you a good plug, though. We do have the Mars Sustainability Report that we're going to put in the chat so that people can have that. So that you can see the multifaceted components by which Mars is looking at this, and some of the things that Margo did talk about. So Diccon, she did mention the practice, and she mentioned very specifically there are things why it would benefit a practice. But can you dive in a little bit more in, why does it matter in the daily clinical decisions? Why should this small practice in Waukesha, Wisconsin, or someone who's in, South Dakota or South Carolina, wherever you may be in the United States, see that maybe this is something I should be taking a better look at for my practice?
Yes, so because we know that not only is what we do in the practice affecting our own health, but also the health of the environment, like Margo is talking about, and we know that climate change is the biggest health threat of the 21st century, but that also our veterinary practice itself, as she was alluding to, has substantial impacts. And one of those that really has come to light recently in human healthcare is the number of 9% of all annual US greenhouse gas emissions come from practicing human healthcare. And so I then did a GDP analysis and looked at that, how to translate it then to veterinary care. And it ended up being around 0.25% of those greenhouse gas emissions, total greenhouse gas emissions, or maybe 12 million tons. But that ranks us as a country about 100 out of 260, or similar to Puerto Rico. So veterinary industry is creating a huge amount of emissions, and those emissions mostly come from burning fossil fuels. And we know that air pollution is one of the great concerns of this time. So we really need to think of that. And this is part of an extension of the do no harm principle. So I really think we need to think about that. When we think about how to mitigate, and this is kind of like a little bit high level, but we can get into deeper stuff, but it's important to sort of, put out the umbrella first. But to mitigate an environmental cost and those emissions, we really need to understand them, and we need to be able to measure them to some degree. So we have an article that I can put on the chat later, and also a carbon calculator that's available through the Veterinary Sustainability Alliance that CSU helped the Veterinary Sustainability Alliance create. So it's the Colorado State University. But what we want to do is we want to kind of understand where we need to prioritize our reductions. So when we did that, we found out that when we procure our electricity, for instance, it accounts for somewhere around 10% of all of our emissions. So transitioning to a renewable low carbon electricity source, so using wind turbines, using solar, working with certain levels of hydro, etc., geothermal, that's a really great way to go. So look for that. Go to your utility. We did that at my hospital. Mars has done that and built a huge wind turbine farm to generate that, can now power all the hospitals in the US that are under the business units of Mars Veterinary Health. Then electrification, okay? So heating your hospital, cooling your hospital, drying things in your hospital, appliances, when they are gas-powered or oil-powered, etc., that can account for maybe 10–15% of emissions as well. So if we went to heat pumps and we electrify all of those appliances, we can massively reduce those. And at my hospital, we put in a heat pump water heater to help begin that transition to reducing those emissions. Other things, and we can go into great detail, I've got some good examples, but we also need to realize that the other things like Margo was mentioning, procurement, our client travel and our own travel, how we eat and drink and our waste. Actually, this is other big scope, and it accounts for maybe 50 to 80%. But we can do things better. We can plug in our electric cars. In fact, I just spoke to VCA West LA. They have 6 electric chargers, and they have 44 of their staff that are using those electric chargers to get to work. I mean, what a celebration that could be. So we can actually, and we've done some data analysis around this with Sustainability Alliance and the Carbon Calculator, we can massively influence our environmental impacts. And I can tell everyone that there is encouraging news that we can absolutely readily decrease our emissions by 40 to 50% just by making some good sustainable choices. So again, this is doable, and this is what everyone needs to hear. But it, we'll talk about how we can do that in a bit more detail in a minute.
Well, what I love is it sounds awesome, but I also feel like, oh my God, that sounds like a lot. So I don't know if anyone else is feeling overwhelmed when he starts talking about, here's all the things that you can be doing, but we don't just flip a light switch on and all of a sudden we're green in a practice. So before we get to the specific things that a practice can do, can we start back at a little bit at the beginning and talk about getting the employees engaged and really backing up just a little bit? Because everything you're saying, Diccon, I mean, wow, just sounds so amazing, but people actually have to do it. And when you're also dealing with, a full list of patients that need to be seen every day, you're dealing with people calling in sick, everything. So you're the main lead for the green team within your hospital. So can you talk to us about what is a green team? What does that mean? Because you don't just suddenly go poof and all of a sudden we're green. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, so a team can be any number of people, more than one, I guess, usually anyway. So yeah, it requires 1 or 2 people, maybe 5, 6 people to come together. It's good if they're like-minded, and you could reach out to staff, find friends, influencers, other people, other associates in your practice that are similarly engaged, have similar values. So that like-mindedness really helps. And if you can have people from different parts of the practice, so maybe they're veterinarians, they're particularly technicians, or front desk staff, managers, custodians, they're all important. This can then allow you to really influence and expand the interest throughout the hospital, can help you collaborate and really access resources. And then when you go back and you've got an action and you really want to try to begin it, if you have staff that are, technicians, and they're going to be talking to technicians, that might be easier than if the manager is the one that's trying to drive this. So again, suggestions from a peer are always better accepted than demands by, a superior, things like that. And crucially, I would say, support for management is really important, particularly if you can make a business case for sustainability, like Margo was talking about. They'll be more on board because we can actually save things. And my manager knows now how much we have saved over the last a little bit. And, the role of the team is about trying to help us facilitate transition. So we need to normalize the conversation. We need to try to embed it. And we do need to have a bit of a top-down approach with those managers to help that, provide enough space and time for that to happen. Just like George Bernard Shaw said, progress is impossible without change, and those that cannot change their minds can't change anything. And so it's so true. It requires openness, tolerance, flexibility for everyone, and lots of time and patience. And I bet my manager right now is just can't believe it because I'm saying something about me being patient. But forcing barriers just doesn't work, and it will put up barriers. So try to maintain the drive, maintain the momentum. And just really briefly, I think that the other thing we need to do is create structure. It's all great to have a great idea, but what we have at our hospitals, we have regular meetings every month. And this means there's a time set aside for us to say, okay, this is when we're going to meet. and it provides some accountability and responsibility. We divide up our assignments and roles, so we're not all doing it, or not just one of us are doing it. And then we really try to hold each other accountable, so that we set and manage expectations, but don't ask one person to do too much. And then, again, coming back to providing enough time and space and funds. And always think about, can you expand your sphere? Can you talk to other clinics? Maybe they could be corporate, maybe they could be part of veterinary medical society, local ones, to help you do that. And two last points. One is listen to the feedback of staff. If you don't listen to your staff when they push back, you're not going to get anywhere. So think about, and if they've got an idea and you can implement that idea, you're going to get massive engagement and buy-in, share that ownership that can really empower them. You can use a suggestion box or something like that. And then when you do something really great, celebrate it. We did that with our local utility when we transitioned to 100% renewable electricity. And actually tomorrow, we're taking some of our staff to the local state-of-the-art recycling center, just so we can learn a bit more about the recycling area and engage again on this topic. So those are some ideas for starting a green team and generating inspiration.
So I would encourage anyone, we have a series of podcasts that we've done for the Sustainability September, and we have an incredible one with David and Jessica Irwin that both work at ACC. And one of the things that they talked about within their green team that I thought was kind of an interesting perspective was we all have muscle memory. And they talk about how you automatically go, if you're at the airport or wherever you are, and there's the recycling bins, and you don't stop to think, you just go, it's trash. We automatically go, it's trash. It's got a liquid in it, so therefore it's trash. And so they actually had set up a table that were helping the staff when they came in to have muscle memory to pick up the trash, go, how would it be sorted? Just to help them as they were walking through on a break or whatever it might be. It seems different and going, oh, that's not an approach I would have ever thought, but it really was kind of impressive to see this pile of items that could be then sorted out, because they understand that it's a simple little exercise, but getting people to understand where do things go and when do things get there. And that was the green team that did that. And I think that that's really wickedly cool to see the green team thinking of a different way to get people to get their buy-in. So highly encourage you to listen to those podcasts. Jennifer and I'm sorry, Jessica and David were amazing on the podcast. So I highly encourage you to listen to that one. But I do want to ask Margo too, this is just the beginning, getting a green team, but there are real substantial things to help with that first checklist when the green team comes in that they could be starting at. And there's so much innovation with regards. You've created some amazing partnerships with how people would get the products into their practices, et cetera. Can you kind of give us a little bit of a taste of that? And then we'll have Diccon give us a little bit more detail of some very specific things people can be doing in the practice as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I can give a couple examples. Because you were just talking about waste and recycling and the other great podcast, I'll build on that a little bit because it's such an important one. And it's also a great place to start when you think about, where do you begin? You've got a green team. What are the first things to do? And I recommend looking at waste and recycling because it's also one of the really visible things. And it's usually one of the first things that the team is likely raising and maybe saying, hey, I really wish we had recycling, or I really wish we knew where this recycling went. Does it actually go anywhere? Questions around waste and recycling, because you really see it, right? You see it in a clinic. And so you described, Catherine, from the other podcast, this exercise they went through of building the muscle memory, learning how to separate correctly. And I would add to that, if you don't have recycling, call your local waste company, your waste hauler, ask to add that service. And you have to go beyond that. You really look around the clinic, look at where do we generate the most waste. It's likely if you're emergency and specialty, in your operating rooms, GP as well, in your break rooms as well, right? When you're thinking about just lunchtime and your own kind of personal waste from the team. But look around, where is the most waste generated, and make sure that you always have multiple bins. So a landfill bin next to a recycling bin, because when there's only one option, everything's going to get chucked in there, right? So look at the bins And also think about the signage. I think we've all stood in front of a bin, paralyzed, trying to figure out which bin does an item go in, right? And nobody has time to deal with that. So make sure your signs are really clear. Your waste hauler should be able to give you some. If not, you may need to make your own. Every municipality is different, so you do have to make sure you've got the right one. And do those trainings like you described that our colleagues have done at VCA to communicate, make sure people know how to do it. And you've probably heard the word wish cycling. This is where you really wish that something were recyclable. So you put it in the blue bin and just hope that it goes somewhere good. That's actually worse, because that item, if it's not recyclable, contaminates potentially that entire load or the truckload of materials. So if in doubt, throw it out. Put it in the landfill bin if you're not really certain that it can be recycled. And that goes for at home too, right? I think we all have the same challenge there. Sometimes we're not sure. So if you don't have time to look it up, throw it out. A couple other things on waste and recycling. There's also some innovative alternative recycling that we're really excited that we talk about in our sustainability report. We have in some of our clinics, which is recycling for those not easy recyclable materials, which for the most part here in the US is any of those flexible plastics. Think about bubble wrap, plastic bags, a lot of medical plastics are not curbside. You can't just put them in the blue bin. Our infrastructure and our recycling facilities can't handle them. Hopefully someday the US will. There are countries in Europe that can do this already, which is exciting. So our stopgap kind of Band-Aid approach is what we're calling specialty recycling. And it is a more expensive option, but it does allow you to recycle those materials and to collect them. And they do then get responsibly recycled and turned into other materials rather than just going to landfill, which is where all of those plastics are mostly going today in the US. So there are options like that to look in. They're mostly mailback programs. So you're sealing up a box for anyone on the call who has one of these in their clinic and shipping it back and getting a new box. But there are solutions like that that we're excited about and that we're able to try and share out with the industry how those are working.
So a couple things and again, I'm not trying to give you all the podcast information, but there's a couple of things that also were stated on there. And one of them, and I do actually want Diccon to answer these. I'm sorry, Diccon, this wasn't on the pre-list of questions, but this, I got triggered by it all and thought it was really good. Can we actually give the definition of reduce, reuse and recycle? Because what is really interesting is I think we kind of glom over and I think everything is a recycle. And it does give us key tips into things that we could be doing in the practice. I don't know, unless Margo, you want to take that one, but the idea that we hear recycle, 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 but there is the methodology of the reduce, reuse, recycle. Which one of you wants to take that one?
I'm happy to. And I was so glad to hear, yes, on the other podcast, I think Dr. Megan Gilfooly mentioned the waste hierarchy. I think Dr. Ben O'Kelly did too. I was like, yes. And so briefly what you're referencing, Catherine, is what we call the waste hierarchy. And just picture the top of the triangle is the very first thing you want to do. And that is reduce, avoid, prevent. Think about how can we avoid the creation of waste in the first place? Waste is a human concept. If you think about nature, there is no waste. Excrement gets turned back into fungi and so on. So waste is a thing we made up as humans, unfortunately. So how can we avoid? Do you need to use that item? Can I use something else instead? Do I even need it in the first place? So have that type of mindfulness around that avoidance, reduce. If you can't, if you have to use the thing, let's just say the next level is reuse. Is there something I could reuse instead of grabbing a brand new thing, whatever that thing is? If you really can't find something reusable, exactly to your point, Catherine, the third thing is recycle. So recycle should never be first. I mentioned it first because it is kind of that sometimes the easier thing, but it should be the third thing. And so it's a solution, but not the first one you want to go to. The one under recycle that isn't always included is just the throwing to landfill, basically, which is obviously one of the bottom ones that we want to consider. One other piece I'll throw in about that is that the true bottom of the chart in a lot of ways for us in the veterinary profession is medical waste, because that is incinerated. And so if you picture an incineration plant, likely using a lot of energy, right, to burn those materials. And so that is a heavy carbon footprint, bad. So that's a reminder on that separation we talked about. Really only put in medical waste what is truly medical waste. If we're putting other stuff in there, we're just burning and using that much more energy and increasing our carbon footprint. So landfill is indeed a little bit better than incineration and medical waste. So that's your full hierarchy triangle that you can picture. We can also post a link of an image of one.
I just found it to be really interesting because it's a great place for someone to start thinking, should we be doing this, and understanding those definitions. But let's really get to the really dive in. What can a practice do? And so I'm going to kick this over to Diccon and say, one of the first things that you and I talked about was washing our hands and what that means in recycling, reducing, and being better for the environment. But let's go further than that. So it sounds funny that I would say that, like, why are we talking about washing our hands? But I'll let you take that and start to walk us through like what can be done at a practice level when they're first starting. How can they start? They have the green team. Now, where do they start?
Yeah, so I think that I mean there's many. It's a huge sea of things that they could do, but I think one of the first things I'd say is go back to just what Margo was talking about, and let's talk about reusing things. Because when you reuse something, you keep it at its highest utility level. Every time you break it down into its constituent parts and do recycling, it costs more energy, costs more water. So it just makes good business sense to keep them. So I would say things like reusable mugs, plates, bowls, and cutlery in the break room. And it might sound minimal, but it actually is it's a beginning, it's a start, and it's a conversation. You're sort of setting the stage. Actually, the number of clients that have come in and said, "Oh, you've got reusable cups. Is that okay?" And we said, "Well, yes." And we tell them that they go out and they get in the dishwasher at a certain temperature, et cetera, et cetera. And we haven't had any pushback. A lot of people, they come into my consult room, they've got their reusable mug, they say, "Well, this is so cool, you've got reusable mugs." So it really can be a big conversational starter. There's so much soft drink and water that's transported all over the world in these bottles. Why don't you just get a refillable water station? And lots of our staff have refillable water bottles. I can't put a picture up because it's not that kind of forum, but you can see all the water bottles that are on the side outside of our treatment area where staff go and they know that's where they can get their water. So I would say that's a great one start. Another pretty simple thing would again be around water, and it would be, get a water distiller. We use distilled water for things like autoclave, your lab, even the coffee machine, and dentists use a lot. And I did hear that one dentistry group was using thousands of dollars worth of distilled water. Well, one, that's a cost of the practice. Two, you've had to transport all that heavy water. Then it's in all that plastic. And unless you're recycling or refilling those plastic bottles, then that's an egregious waste as well. So just getting a water distiller is actually a pretty simple way. And practices use a lot of it. Other, I guess, big steps when we think about reusables would be really high quality, state-of-the-art surgical materials. And I know that quite a lot of people have already talked about them on some of the other periods of time you've been talking to people over this last month. But, these sterilization containers really are an amazing and state-of-the-art system so that it can massively cost less over time. There's actually significantly less plastic waste, all that blue wrap that you use for those specialty practices out there and some of the other practices, all those peel pouches that you might use for dentistry or small laceration packs. Those all come and have to be broken down and recycled. So going with a smaller tin that can go into an autoclave, it's easy to pack up. I can tell you, staff, and when you read about it, you talk to other people like the people that Ellie West has been working with in the UK for years and years and years, almost 2 decades. They've had some of these, the less labor costs, the improved staff efficiency, the improved staff satisfaction is huge. And then you don't have things like, oh, we've got this tear here, we're not going to be able to use this kit now. Does it have to be flash sterilized? And also can help reduce infection rates. And so, again, when we ever think about sustainability, it can cost less, it can be more efficient, and it can actually provide, most of the time, a higher quality medical care. And I think that's something that I really want to emphasize to people, is that none of these actions should actually reduce the quality of medical care. They should actually increase it. And again, it's a way to really engage with staff, align your values with staff, which can be really helpful with retention in this difficult period of time that veterinarians are facing, or veterinary industries facing. So retention is huge.
I would love to hear from each one of you, just the notion being is, before we end tonight, what are 3 steps? So Margo, this question is for you and for you, Diccon, so for both of you to answer. What are 3 steps that you would advise the folks that are here tonight and those that are going to watch this later that they can do today to really make an impact on the environment? Who wants to go first?
I can jump in. So 3 things. So I think 1, we've mentioned this earlier, but it's a simple one. So starting simple, look around when you're at work, could be at home as well, and pick one item that you use pretty frequently, either daily or often, that is a single-use disposable item, and figure out a way to replace it with something reusable. And that can be all sorts of things. We could be talking coffee mugs, right? But all sorts of things could potentially be reusable: paper towels, scrub hats, etc. So start somewhere. A second is play with measuring your carbon footprint. So I think someone put in the chat the tool. There's also ones for your personal carbon footprint. You could use one of those as well. There's a bunch of free ones out there. They can take about 10 minutes for the simplified ones. You plug in, how much you travel, how you travel, what you eat, what kind of house you live in, etc. for your personal one. Then there's the veterinary one as well that you can do for your clinic. And it will give you a sense of what is your carbon footprint, how do you compare to others similar to you. And often there are tips in some of those tools that tell you, here's how you can start lowering your footprint in different ways. So a good exercise to do, 10 minutes to get a sense of your personal one, or go deeper with the veterinary one, which takes a little bit more time. And last thing I'd say is educate yourself, in different ways. Read about environmental sustainability. Do what you're doing right now, attending a CE discussion on this. Get out there and look for information. Once you know some of this stuff, you can't ignore it, right? Ignorance is bliss, and we don't want that. So equip yourself with the knowledge around this, because we all, as hopefully you're taking away today, we all can really make a difference, and we're empowered to do so in the roles that you all play in veterinary clinics. It's really quite a opportunity to make a difference. So those are my 3.
I love those. Diccon.
So I'm going to take a really high level approach, because I think that's really the 3 steps that we can take immediately. So building on what Margo was just saying, I would say, firstly, fall back in love with nature and how bountiful and glorious it is. And I know everyone on this call right now is saying, well, that sounds pretty trite. I came to learn some real details here. Well, I could give you a lot of details, and we can talk about that as well. But, I think that finding your passion, finding your drive to care, that's the thing that's going to endure in this endeavor. Living and working more sustainably, it's a journey. It's not a passing fad. And if you want to get momentum and impetus, you're going to need a lot of sustenance. Baba Duan once said, because in the end, we will only conserve what we love. And he was a forestry specialist. Falling in love with nature is going to be something different to everyone, but you don't have to drive 6 hours. You don't have to fly across the world. You don't have to buy $1,000 worth of, REI gear. It just means that you take a moment. You have some mindfulness. Julie talked about this in one of the other podcasts as well. And, that kind of sustained compassion, attention, moving slowly, quietly, noticing, and enabling all your senses, kind of be in the moment. Don't get distracted. I think that's going to help. All right. So then next, talk about it. So those are the words that are always pushed through by Catherine Hayhoe, who's a climate scientist. but talk's cheap. But I would recommend that you communicate openly about how to be sustainable, your concerns, your successes, your challenges, engage people. Really try to normalize this conversation. This shouldn't be a special month. This shouldn't be a special hour. This should be something we do all day, every day. You want to embed it. You want to hardwire it into all your operations, make it a key tenet and your mission statement, a key value, and make sure that staff are not alone, feel supported. So, again, hardwiring that in everything we do is important, and then really try to scale it. We're talking mostly right now about what we do at work, but the real influence comes when you expand it into your community and beyond. So your friends, your family, hobbies, church, etc. And then lastly, I'd say we really need to stride out boldly. And this is why I talked about in the beginning, and why it was so important to sort of set that stage, I thought, because embracing sustainability is a real imperative. We are now in a fragile moment. We need to be accountable. We need to take responsibility. Like Michelle Obama says, we need to really go out there and do something. We adopt an action, but then adopt many actions. Encourage others to join that journey. Don't be afraid. Don't hesitate. Be resolute. Hey, make it fun. Make it a game. We try to do that, like you were talking about with the waste segregation game. That's what we were doing. Have it become part of that job. And then, if you are having problems with that, reframe it, reword it. That can be crucial as well to have it on board. Because we need everyone in this moment to come together to work on this. As Robert Swan said, this is the greatest threat to our planet. Is the belief that someone else is going to save it. So I would take up the mantra, if it is not us, then who? And if not now, then when?
I think those are really powerful words. I would say this for anyone who is in the Midwest, particularly right now, nature is telling us something is changing. So every single day, our leaves are changing and how quickly. So I do think that the changing of seasons, if you live in the Midwest, we get to see it all the time. And it's a constant reminder that something is happening around us. So I just give you that little piece. I feel bad for anyone who's not in the Midwest who doesn't get to see this beautiful change of colors that we get. I'm getting yellows, reds, oranges. It's incredible of what we are doing right now. I also want to point out one of the best pieces of advice that came from all of this that we have received on one of the podcasts. And if you haven't listened to him, I highly encourage you to, because it is incredible. He said, it wasn't he? Well, yes, it was Ben. Pick one thing, do one thing, and don't abandon it. If you decide you're all going to use reusable cups in your practice, then that's what you do, and you make sure it works and you figure it out. If you've decided you're going to weigh your trash and you're failing at doing it, you can't figure out how to do it, figure out what's wrong with the system and fix it. Don't jump away from it to do something else. So I think there's some incredible tips of helping practices figure out that first thing and figuring out how to build off of that. But it all starts with one person's why. And it could come from your veterinary assistant. It could come from your CVT, because I know we've got several CVTs on this call. It could come from anyone in your practice saying, I see something we could be doing better. And it is the responsibility of everyone in a practice to listen to that and say, could we all? Just like Diccon says, if not now, when? So I highly encourage you all to do that. I would say that we do have several toolkits on the website. Shannon and Julie and Margo have been putting stuff in the chat. I promise you, we will also share out those links. It won't be in the email I'm sending you tonight, but you will also get that. Shannon is also putting out it. Shannon, are you able to load that in so that everyone can get their CE?
Just put it in there.
Okay, so if you want to get your CE, please make sure you're pulling that forward as we do. This has been an incredible journey for the Bridge Club. We've never done a takeover before, and this has had such a huge impact on us and what we've been doing and the comments we've been receiving about it. It is an important thing for us to do. Yes, it was cute, Sustainability September, but I don't think anyone said it better than Diccon. It's not a month, it's an everyday thing for us to be able to do. We still have the entire month ahead of us. Sign the pledge. If you're new to this is something you've never done before, sign the pledge. You're just going to look around and see if there's something you can do. You don't have to do anything more than that. And then also just want to let you always know that the Bridge Club is here. If you ever need anything, if you'd like to connect further with any of our folks, we'd be happy to make those introductions for you. But honestly, if it weren't for Mars Veterinary Health for really taking the charge on this, I don't know if I would have learned as much. So I am forever grateful for that. So as everyone knows, we end, if this is your first Bridge Club, you did not know that, but we do end with a toast. So I'm going to send it over to our Chief Veterinary Technician Officer for her to close us out for the evening before we say our final thanks.
I'm going to read it because it's a bit, but as we wrap up tonight's conversation, let's raise a glass. Tonight, we've seen how even the smallest choices we make in exam rooms, operating rooms, break rooms, or just daily life can add up to something much bigger. Here's to each of you for leading by example, for caring not only for animals and people, but also the planet we share. Small shifts can produce big impacts. So cheers to sustainability and cheers to all of you.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you to Margo and to Diccon for taking their
Yes,
time.
thank you to Mars.
Yes, and thank you to Mars Veterinary Health for really taking their time to help bring us this forward. Lots more to come. Please make sure. Oh, I just love how everyone's found the wine glass. That's just making me
Oh, I didn't even know
excited.
it was in there.
I never knew. I knew there was a new one. I knew there was a new one that had come out. With that, everyone, enjoy your evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's make the world a little bit greener. Cheers, everybody.
Go green.
Yeah, go green.
I had to do that.
For a lot of ways.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.